Hello there, thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. Methods of Determining the Date of Roman Concrete Monuments by Ester Boise Van Deman, published March 15, 1912. Paper published in Archaeological Institute of America. For the dating of ancient monuments, the evidence used is of three classes: internal, external, and a third class, which may be called variable evidence. With the nature of the second class, the external evidence, which is, for the most part, virtually all are familiar. The evidence which has been called variable is that furnished by decoration or decorative material, by dedicatory inspiration, and especially by brick stamps. All these, when incorporated in or belonging to the structure of the monument, may be accepted as internal evidence. When, however, they form a non-structural part of the building or are merely attached to it, they cannot be given more weight than that of the external evidence. Upon the second of the three classes, that of the external evidence, the conclusion of the earlier writers on topography were almost wholly based. Since the beginning of the new era of excavation, however, increasing attention has been paid to the third or variable classes of evidence, especially by that famous group of German scholars of which Jordan was the center, whose important work formed the basis of our present knowledge of the chronology of the ancient monument. The first class, that of pure internal evidence, has received up to the present time but little attention. Internal evidence may be considered in general as of four kinds. The first of these is that established by the relation of the building or a portion of a building in question to the buildings above and below it, as well as to those adjoining it on the same level. In brief, the structural environment of the monument. Evidence of the second kind rests upon the harmony or the absence of harmony in the general plan of the building itself, and the architectural relation of the various parts of it to each other and to the whole. The third class of evidence is that drawn from the structural unity or lack of unity of the monument, as well as from the uniformity or diversity of its materials and methods of construction, while the fourth is furnished by the characters of the materials and by the methods of construction. The realm of knowledge depends upon the study of the last two kinds of evidence, especially that dealing with the characters, the materials, and the methods of construction has remained up to the present time a large part in terra incognita, although from time to time excursions, most often merely tentative, have been made into it. A more exhaustive investigation in this field, more specifically concerning the materials themselves and the methods used in concrete structures, has seemed therefore of primary importance in order to confirm or, if need be, to correct the conclusions which have been drawn from the other and time-honored classes of evidence. The purpose of this investigation has been twofold. 1. The study of the materials and the methods of construction per se, and 2. The establishment of a fixed canon or norm of construction for the various periods by which the accepted chronology of the concrete monuments already known may be tested and date assigned more easily to new formed or as yet undated monuments. Roman concrete structures are divided for the sake of convenience into two classes, those made, 1 of unfaced and 2 of faced opus caementatio. In the first class may be included 1. Foundation and structures for monuments both of opus quadrum and opus cementissimum, 2. Podia, 3. Freestanding walls which from their position or use were regarded as substructures, and 4. Vaults. The second class may be divided into walls faced with opus quadratum, opus incertum, opus reticulum, including quasi-reticulum, opus testacium, and opus mixum. In dealing with monuments of the second class, the body of the structure and the face must be considered separately, since the distinctive characteristics, the earmarks of the various periods, are to be found now in the one and now in the other. There are cases also, which are by no means rare, where a wall of a certain period has been refaced at a later time. A noticeable example of this occurs on the south side of the extra of the Hippodrome in the Palatine, where a considerable stretch of wall of the period of Domitian has been covered by a facing of the time of Septimus Severus. This facing in its turn is at present of a danger of yielding place soon to a modern one, as can be seen in the following illustration. The body of a Roman concrete structure, whether faced or unfaced, is composed of pieces of stone called by Vitruvius caementa, or of bricks laid in a bed of mortar, which together form a solid unfired mass, the opus caementissimum of the Romans. The caementa vary much in material and in size in different periods, as well as in the manner of their disposal in the mass. The periods marked by a full mystery of the technique of a construction, the caementa differ also according as they were used in foundation and podia, freestanding walls or vaults. Since they consist in great part of the rejected or broken materials of the preceding period, they furnish in many cases valuable data, not only concerning the monument in which they are found, but also concerning the earlier buildings of which they form a part. In the Regia of Calvinus, for example, the caementa of the lower walls, contrary to the rule of the period, consists wholly of large pieces of capallacio, the inferior tufa which was used almost exclusively in the very early buildings. We may safely conclude, therefore, that the early buildings which the Regia of 36 BC replaced has retained wholly or in part its very primitive walls. The mortar is composed of pozzolano, which is called by Vitruvius arena fulvicia, and lime. The data derived from this pozzolana arena, the variety of which used in the various periods differ widely, are often of great importance. A most striking example of this is to be found in the monuments of the Augustine period, in which one of the distinctive characteristics of the construction, the dusky red color of the mortar, arises from the use in it of a special variety of pozzolana, the introduction of which by Augustus or by his predecessor Julius Caesar marks an epoch in the history of concrete construction. The lime also differs much in the various periods, in quality as well in quantity. The facing of concrete monuments varies greatly in the different periods. With the increase of knowledge in the manufacture and use of concrete or opus caementorum, as we may more safely call it, and the corresponding decrease in the structural value assigned to squared stone or opus quadrutum, arose the use of latter as more facing. In consequences of this change, certain structures, for reason of economy, were left practically unfaced, or were faced with small stone as a substitute of the more costly opus quadrutum. In place, this facing was small stone, the opus incertum and opus reticulatum of the late Republican and Augustine period, brick facing was introduced. With this class of concrete monuments, especially those faced with bricks, the present discussion is in the main concerned. In the facing of concrete structures of this late type, the brick used in Rome are of two distinct kinds. The first of these is that made from broken tegulia or plunged roof tiles, and at a later time from the large floor tiling called tegulia bipedales. These bricks, to which may be applied the name of tile bricks, are roughly broken except in the front side, which is evenly sawed. In the earlier periods, they are more often irregularly trapezoidal in shape, but after the introduction of the triangular bricks, they tend to approach the triangular form. The bricks which are made from roof tile are conspicuous for their fine composition, even those neat texture, and clear magenta red or light yellow color. These made by padellas, which belong to a much later period, are of coarser composition and vary considerably in color. The bricks of the second kind, using wall facing, are triangular in shape and, in Rome, are made by sawing diagonally into 2 pieces smaller square tiles or brick, measuring from 19 to 22 cm. Outside of Rome, notably in Pompeii and Sicily, square tiles of various sizes were used, which were sawed into 4 triangles. In a large number of bipadels, marks for sawing are to be found in both the large and small theatre of Taormino. A few others, also similar marks, were seen by me several years ago in Rome Villa in Corfu. These triangular bricks in Rome are far less fine in composition and texture than the roof tile bricks, and vary in color from reddish yellow to a deep yellowish red. In deciding the date of any ancient monument, after consideration of the external and variable evidence concerning it, its level and orientation, and its structural relationship to the adjoining monuments must be determined. Passing then to the monument itself, it is necessary first to ascertain whether it consists of a single building or of a group of buildings. For determination of this question, an examination must be made not only of its architectural plan, but also of its structural unity. This structural unity, or better, the lack of it, is seen most clearly in the facing, though it is often almost as apparent in the body of the monument. It is shown 1. By a break in the continuity of the concrete mass itself or of the facing, causing often a noticeable crack. 2. By a change in the material and methods of construction, or 3. In both these ways. In the body of the building, if no marked difference exists in the type of construction, the break in the structural continuity is almost impossible to detect. In the facing, on the other hand, when the break occurs in a straight stretch of perpendicular wall, it is very apparent. When it occurs, however, between the stories of a building or at a corner, as in the accompanying illustration of Figure 4, it is more difficult to discover unless accompanied by a noticeable change in the material and methods of construction. The difficulty is often still further increased by the presence of a form of false bonding, by which the line of junction of the 2 walls was concealed and the parts bound more closely together. A change in the material and methods of construction is far more readily detected. It is traceable in the body of the structure, 1. In the difference in the material and size of the cement or filling, as well as in the manner of their disposal in the mass, and 2. In the composition, color, and cohesion of the mortar. In the facing of the structure, the changes is very clear where the types of construction have no superficial resemblance to each other, as in certain remains in the favela Figure 5, in which the earlier wall of Opus Quadrum has been used as a foundation for one of Opus Cementius faced with Opus Reticulum, which in its turn has been partially replaced by a later wall faced with brick. The changes is less plain where the facing is wholly of brick. It is, however, traceable in the size and kinds of bricks used, as well as in the thickness of the joints of mortar and in its composition. Where both a break in the continuity of the mass or of the facing and a change in the type of construction are found, the lack of structural unity and, in consequence, the complex characters of the monument are clearly apparent, as in the illustration from the Atrium Vestae given above in Figure 6. The simplicity or complexity of the structure having been determined in monuments of Opus Caementicium, by no means an easy task, an examination of the internal evidence bearing more directly upon the dates or dates of the building is possible. In such an examination, a fixed standard or norm for each period is necessary, with which the materials and methods of construction used in the monument or in the several parts of it may be compared. The establishment of this standard or canon has been, as has been said, one of the main purposes of the present investigation. For the determination of the data upon which this canon should be based, a list was made of all the monuments made wholly or in part of the Opus Cementicium which still exist or of which an authoritative record had been kept. A special examination was then undertaken of all the still existing, to which, on the basis of external or internal evidence, a fixed date has been assigned. In the case of each of these monuments, so far as it has been possible, the examination has concluded the following points. 1. The orientation and, where ascertainable, the original level of the building. 2. Its structural environment. 3. Its architectural plan. And 4. Its structural unity. On the basis of the results thus obtained, a list of the monuments of Opus Caementium in which of the greater period has been compiled, which, though depleted by the loss of the few familiar names found in the handbooks or topography, is yet sufficiently large for the purpose in hand. A preliminary outline of the main features of this canon, so far as they are at the present determined, is here given. 1. The kingly and early republican period, 753 to 210 BC. Of the kingly and early republican period, but a few remains are left to which even approximate date can be assigned. From this, however, it is clear that the same type of construction, which is a ruder form of opus quadratum, was continued and changed throughout the whole period. The material used in the early parts of the period is capellaceae, the friable grey tufa found on the slopes of the Palatine and Capitolium, as well as the most of the other hills of the city. The blocks used in the courses are low and broad, and the unit of measure employed in the italic foot is of 0.275 meter. The walls seem in all cases to be laid without mortar. The principal monuments of this more primitive type, concerning some of which, however, considerable doubt prevails, are the following: the portion of the so-called Servian wall made of capellaceum, the Tullianum, the foundation of the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, the ancient cistern on the Palatine, the lower part of the Regia, and of the Lacus Curtius, the republican rostra of the first period, the earlier Sacelium of Venus Blossomum, and the temple of Castor of the first period, see figure 7, which the earlier Pons Juturnian. From their level and orientation, certain other monuments in the Forum and on the Palantia may be assigned to the same period. The most important of these are the pavements and the sewers of the Capellaceae at the lower level in the Forum. The rebuilding of the city, which followed its partial destruction by the Gallus in 390 BC, is probably traceable in a small group of remains which, while agreeing in their general character with those just described, differ somewhat in details. The type of construction is, as in early buildings, opus quadratum. For the capellaceum of the more primitive walls, however, other and somewhat less friable kinds of tufa were substituted, especially a light brown red and a greyish yellow variety, both of which are very porous and weather badly. The blocks are much higher than in the walls of capellaceum. The unit of measurement employed is the Greek foot of 0.296 meter. The principal monuments of this group are the latter portion of the Servian wall and a few unidentified buildings on the Palatine. 2. The later Republican period, 210 BC to the period of Sulla. In the fire of 210 BC, a large portion of the center of the city was again destroyed. With the erection of the new monuments in the period following this catastrophe, a new era of construction began. Throughout the period, opus quadrum remained the common type of construction for monumental structures. Fine variety of tufa were, however, used, and the technique reached a higher grade of excellence. Peperino and travertine were both introduced in this period, though the latter was as yet employed very sparingly. Foreign marble were imported also, but not until very late in the period. The most important monument in Opus Quadrum in the period is the Aqua Marcia, built in 144 BC. While, however, Opus Quadratum remained the prevailing mode of construction, the period is marked by the first appearance in Rome of concrete or opus caementicium as a structural building material. The exact time of its introduction cannot be fixed. The first dated monument in which it has yet been found are the podia of the temples of Concord and Castor of 121 and 111 BC. The full mystery of technique in the handling of the new material, as shown in these structures, makes it safe to assume, however, that a knowledge of its use antecedates by a considerable period of time of their erection. We may, therefore, assign the introduction to the middle, if not by early parts of the 2nd century. The new material was probably introduced in the first place as a mere core for buildings as Opus Quadratum. With increasing knowledge of the relative value of the two types of construction, however, the parts shifted and Opus Quadratum became subsidiarily in importance, having often little value beyond that of a facing. Before the end of the period, for this more expensive type of facing, one of small stone was substituted, to which was applied the name of Opus Incertum. The exact date of its recognition as a distinct structural factor cannot be determined. It is clear, however, that it was so regarded before the end of the period, that is, before the time of Sulla. In the mass or body of the structure, the monuments of Opus Caementicium throughout the period show but little change either in material or method of construction. The caement consists largely of the broken or rejected materials from the earlier period. They are therefore almost entirely of tufa, capellaceum and greyish-yellow tufa, being used in large quantities, with a small amount of the later greyish-brown and brownish-red varieties. The travertine, bricks, or marble appear, and only occasionally pieces of peperino. The pieces are usually above medium size, often exceeding in their greatest diameter 40 cm. No order is shown in their disposal in the mass. The mortar is of an ashy grey type and is very friable. The arena used in it varies much in color, grey and brown predominating, while red is almost whole lacking. It resembles a fine gravel rather than an ordinary pozzolana, being composed of smooth instead of sharp-angled particles. These particles vary much in size, and a large amount of earthy matter is mixed with them. To this admixture of earthy matter in the arena, which is for this reason called by Vitruvius terrosa, is due mainly the friable as well as the grey color of the mortar as a whole. The lime is the very dirty white color, due probably to the earthy characters of the arena. The proportion of lime is also much smaller than in the latter periods. The earliest dated monument in Opus Caementicium, the podium of the Temple of Concord, 121 BC, is strictly speaking unfaced, since the pieces of tufa forming the so-called Opus Incertum of the face do not differ materially, either in themselves or in their arrangement, from the caementum in the body of the structure. The facing of the other monuments, so far as it can be determined, is of Opus Incertum, made of the friable tufa of the period. The more distinctive characteristics, the earmarks of the structures in Opus Caementicium of the period are the following. 1. The very early type of materials used in the body of the structure as caementa, as well as the absence among them of travertine, bricks, and marble. 2. The ashy color and friability of the mortar. 3. The use in the facing of Opus Incertum and its early characters, as seen both in the materials used and in the technique. No complete list has been made as yet of the monuments of the period. The most important of them are the Temple of Concord of the second period, the Temple of Castor of the second period, the arches behind the Forum Juturnia, and the so-called Carceres. 3. The period of Sulla. Of the works of Sulla as a builder, as well as of the imposing monuments erected by others in this period, a large number are preserved outside of Rome, especially in Palestrina, Tivoli, and Pompeii. The splendid public buildings with which he sought to adorn his capital, on the other hand, are represented only by few certain remains. Of the greater monuments erected by others also, but one is left, the Tubularium, built by Q. Lutatius Catulus in 78 BC. From the characters of the monuments erected during the period, it is probable that the majority of them were built wholly of opus quadratum. The remains of a goodly number of such monuments, built of the early tufa, are in fact assigned to Sulla himself, though the proofs are in no case conclusive. To the tabularium, the only date monument of the time, both types of construction are used. The substructure and inner walls being the opus caemensium, both types of construction are used also in a small group of monuments in the forum, which, from their level and structural environment, may be assigned to the general period. No exact date, however, can be assigned to them at present. They have not, therefore, been included in the present discussion, though they agree, except in type of facing, with the work of the period. The outer wall of the tabularium, which from its agreement in construction with Sullan monuments outside of the Rome may be accepted as typical of the period, are of opus quadratum. The material used is almost wholly peperino, though travertine is employed very sparingly in the colonnade. The massive substructures and inner walls are, as has been said, of opus cementitium. The cement are almost wholly of brownish red tufa with little admixture of odd materials. The pieces vary considerably in size, but are usually large. They are laid without special regard to order. The mortar is of the ashy gray type, but is slightly less friable than that of the preceding period. The arena is darker in color and a little less terrosa than earlier. No changes in the lime is perceptible. The walls are practically unfaced. The period of Julius Caesar. With Julius Caesar, a new era in Roman construction began. Succeeding the great plans of Sulla, he formed even greater ones, spurred on during the earlier years by the rival's efforts of Pompey to win favor with the people by gifts of magnificent public monuments. With the carrying out of the plans, which included the construction of the Forum, its extension by direction of the Forum Julium, and the building up of the Campus Martium, a new system of construction gradually arose. The period, however, though marked by this gradual development of new ideas, retained throughout many of the earlier republican methods. It may be called, therefore, the period of transition. Opus quadratum, without admixture of opus cementiums, was retained in certain monumental structures, as the Basilica of Amelia, the Tabernae Novae, and the Forum Julium. The materials used almost wholly in the buildings are grayish-brown tufa and peperino, with travertine for points of special pressure. In the Basilica and Tabernae, however, the earlier grayish-yellow tufa is retained for the foundations. The technique is of high order. A thin layer of lime is used between courses to make the fitting of the joints closer. In the large number of public monuments, both types of construction were used, opus cementitium being used as the tabularium for the more massive portion of the structure, while opus quadratum was still retained for the external walls and also for the points of special pressure. To this class of monuments belong the theatre and the Portius of Pompeii, the theatre of Marcellus, and, in all probability, the Curia and Rostra Julia. The dawn of the new era is shown most clearly, however, by the increasing prominence given to the third class of monuments, those made wholly of opus caementicium. The most conspicuous examples of this class are the funiculi of the Forum, figure 8, the concrete foundation near the Picus Dominitini, and a small group of private houses, of which the earlier Domus Livia and the Palatine is the most important. The monuments of this period, as far as yet been possible to classify them, which are made wholly or in part of opus caementicium, may be divided into two classes. These classes are most easily distinguished by the mortar, which in the one case is of a grey color, resembling the ashy grey type of the earlier monuments, though a little darker, while the other class is a greyish red, approaching more nearly the mortar of the Augustine period. In the body of the structure of the first class, the caementa are in large part of Capellaceous and other friable tufas, the refuse material from the earlier periods. A small amount of later tufa appears, however, and a very little travertine. No bricks or marble are found. The pieces vary much in size and are laid with no apparent attempt at order. The mortar differs but little in color from that of the Sullan period, but is superior in quality, being of a finer texture and harder. The arena is of the same general type as earlier, but less terrosa. The lime is of a slightly better grade and is more abundant. It retains, however, the dirty white color of the earlier periods. The monuments belonging to this first class are the foundation of the Curia Julia, the Rostra Julia, the Domus Livitia of the early period, and the lower walls of the house below the so-called Temple of Jupiter Victor. In the opus caementicium type of the second type of caementa vary in the later period, according to the nature of the structure in which they are used. In the inner walls of the theatre of Pompeii, they are of the same brownish red tufa of which the facing is made and are of medium size. In the funiculi and the massive foundation near the Equus Domitiani, which is of the same period, the caementa are almost entirely of travertine and cells, as in the foundation and substructure of the later periods. They are of medium size and are laid with no attention to order. The mortar is greyish red and is almost entirely free from the friability of the earlier type. The rim is a true pozzolana consisting of sharp angular particles which vary much in size and are often very large. It is but slightly terrosa. The color differs greatly from that of the arena of the earlier periods. Reddish-brown and dark grey predominate, but there is also much red. The lime is much clearer and more abundant than in the earlier type of mortar. Opus incertum as a facing does not appear in any monuments of this period. Its occasional use at a later time is, however, referred to the Vitruvius. In this place appears in both classes of structures. The more elegant opus reticulatum, the rays of which may be assigned to this period. The bits of stone or tesserae of which it is formed are very small, measuring usually 4 cm to 6 cm across the face. They are made commonly of brownish red, though occasionally of the older greyish yellow turfa. The cuniculi, except the sides of the square shafts in the vaulting and the monument near the Equus Dominitiani, are unfaced. The main characteristics of the opus caementicium of the period are the following. 1. The darker grey or reddish-grey color of the mortar and its freedom from the friability of the earlier type. 2. The appearance of caementa of travertine and celse. And 3. The use of opus reticulatum as facing, as well as the small size of the pieces of stone of which it is composed. The principal monuments of the period, made wholly or in part of opus caementicium, are as following. The theatre and the Portus of Pompeii, 55 BC, the Forum Julium, 54 BC, the vault of the adjoining rooms, the Curia Julia 52 BC, the foundation, the Rostra Julia, the Caniculi finished by Augustus, the foundation near the Equus Domitiani, the Theatre of Marcellus finished by Augustus, the Horti Casiris, the earlier Domus Labitii of the Palatine, the private house of the slope of the Palatine beyond the so-called Temple of Jupiter's Victor, the lower walls, the so-called house of the Odyssey landscapes, and the house near the Villa Farnesina. This is the end of today's story. I hope that these past minutes helped you relax and ease you into falling asleep. If you are not 100% there yet, let us just do a breathing exercise. Count mentally with me your breath intakes and exhales. Concentrate on the count, nothing more. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1,